In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Seth MacFarlane, creator of the beloved adult animated comedy Family Guy, proclaimed, "Part of me thinks that Family Guy should have already ended. I think 7 seasons is about right." At the time of saying this, Family Guy was just reaching its 10th season on the air. 13 years later, and it is currently airing its 22nd season, with a 23rd on the way. Yikes. Obviously, a lot more has to be considered when deciding not to renew a show beyond, "it's bad now." If a series is still popular and bringing in steady viewers, aka still making money, a studio would see no justifiable reason to stop producing new episodes, quality be damned. Something also worth considering is that these shows keep a lot of people employed. Like Seth MacFarlane is a multi-millionaire who does collabs with Logic and Jade from Victorious, that's real, look it up. He's a celebrity with stuff to fall back on. But is it really worth putting all the artists, animators, and writers out of a job, especially if the series is still popular, just because you personally don't want to continue working on it anymore? You see a lot of folks online claiming that certain series have gone on for too long. That rhymes. I'm obviously guilty of this myself in the past. But really, what does it even mean for a show to go on for too long? Are there definitive signs that can be pointed to? Or is it simply a case-by-case basis? The point in a show where most agree it started going downhill. But even then, that can be entirely subjective. Look at a series like The Simpsons, quite possibly the most popular show ever. Most share the sentiment that at a certain point the charm started to fade, but you'd be hard-pressed to get a majority of folks to agree on one particular moment. There are people who point to Season 9, some who point to 10, hell, some go as far back as Season 7. Or was it a shift in staff? A bad rut they never managed to get out of? Or could they point to one moment, one episode, which marked the beginning of the end? Stuff like this always gets me wondering. Again, this is such a vague and subjective, subject. And so today I wanted to take a look at a variety of long-running shows infamous for having a catastrophic downfall. Live action, cartoon, whatever. And point out some clear signs that things were beginning to run its course. So without further ado, let's explore and discuss, when does a show go on for too long? But first, if there were anything I'd describe as being, long, it's my brand new standing desk from FlexiSpot. This video is sponsored by FlexiSpot. Being someone who spends 90% of their day working at a screen, I know all about the importance of having a good workspace. So what could be better than an E7 Pro standing desk? There's this easy-to-use keypad that allows you to automatically change the height to whatever you want, allowing you to comfortably stand as you work so you don't get, scoliosis or something. This thing is sturdy too. Not only does it not wobble easily, but it can also carry a ton.
This is high.
Yeah.
Where does it stop? My God.
It's a standing desk, dude.
I didn't think it would be that high.
I've loved having this thing. It has been a great addition to my working environment. I got like 2 more as well. I'm gonna fill my house with these things. So if you were looking for an excellent desk at an affordable price, check out FlexiSpot in the description below. And get more savings by using the exclusive promo code provided in the description as well. And thanks to FlexiSpot for sponsoring this video. The most infamous way for folks to point out when a show has worn out its welcome has got to be with the jump the shark moment. The situations the characters find themselves in getting increasingly more absurd. Like, just look at The Simpsons, that's gotta be the best example, I think. Homer becomes a voice actor. Homer becomes a talk show host. He's part of the paparazzi now. Then he joins the Navy. Becomes a farmer this time. A boxer. A fucking astronaut. It says nothing about the actual quality of these episodes. I like quite a few of these. It's more so a highlight of how the writers feel the need to keep topping themselves. And at a certain point you forget that this started as a simple series about an average working class dad trying his best to provide for his family and become a better person and role model. That was a consistent theme of the first season. Sure, it wasn't always the focal point, but that was the core of the show. What is The Simpsons about now? Well, it's about The Simpsons. And they can fill in any role the plot desires. Also, dude, it took me until like 2 years ago to realize the phrase jump the shark was referencing Happy Days, in which they quite literally had the Fonz jump a shark. Guess I should have expected that. There he goes! This was considered devastating. I personally don't think it's entirely fair to boil a show's downfall to one specific moment. You know, there's so many other factors at play, along with it implying that a series can continue to then regain its footing afterwards. But I definitely agree with the sentiment that it highlights the point in which the characters start taking a backseat in favor of gimmicks. It's like episodes are being written from the perspective of how to entice viewers with soulless spectacle or big reveals, designed to rejuvenate interest rather than a genuine attempt to tell a story. I tried looking up crappy BuzzFeed-esque articles for examples of this, but they're all either endlessly giving the same examples or providing really odd cases of it. Like here's one from Stacker about Grey's Anatomy, a series I unfortunately have become quite familiar with. Don't judge me. This long-running medical drama has experienced all kinds of highs and lows over the years. An ambitious Season 7 musical episode called Song Beneath the Song is every bit as cringe-inducing as it sounds. Call it one of the many times the series has jumped the shark, only to subsequently regain its footing. Not really a jump the shark moment if you immediately admit it gets right back on track now, is it? That show is filled with so many gimmicky episodes to choose from. I'd probably highlight the one where half the cast gets in a plane crash over the one where they sit around singing Snow Patrol. Also, fuck you, Kelly Torres. She didn't do anything in this episode that egregious, I just hit Kelly Torres. Again, fuck you and stuff. To me, a jump the shark moment was more so about it representing a point of no return. A time in which the series abandons its original goals in favor of trying to regain its dwindling viewership. You know, you could point out moments like in The Office where they get rid of Steve Carell, their main character, attempting to replace him with Will Ferrell. A show, especially one like The Office, is all built around the character dynamics and how they all interact with each other. It's bizarre to think they assumed they could simply remove such an integral part of the series and hope that everything would stay the same. My mind jumps to moments like Brian's death in Family Guy.
Oh my god!
An episode I've discussed countless times on this channel now. Wow, I need a hobby. Did the writers kill him because they wanted to teach you a lesson on not taking your loved ones for granted as they could be gone at any moment? Well, that's what Seth would like you to believe. But it was about an advertisement. It was about making a Facebook post saying, "Which Griffin will be killed off? Find out tonight on Fox." I swear Brian better be brought back onto the show or y'all are gonna lose a lot of viewers. Brian is the most beloved character, and it was a big mistake on your part to kill him off. Vinny is a sucky new dog. He needs to sacrifice himself and get hit by a car to bring Brian back. Or Stewie needs to make a new time machine. Sincerely, a very pissed off fan. That was the goal here. You just got someone to realize how invested they are in your series. You got this person by the balls.
Oh shit! Brian's dead! No!
Now they're gonna be sure to tune in every weekend. Because if you stop watching, then I don't know, maybe we'll just kill him off again, huh? Other times it comes off a little more desperate, but there's still an attempt to keep the core idea in mind, like Fairly OddParents being at threat of cancellation. With Butch Hartman's big idea to keep him around being to have Cosmo and Wanda have a baby. Specifically Cosmo. It works in the moment. Throughout its entire run, there's no episode of that show that did better than Fairly Odd Baby. But it's one and done. The spectacle wears off. It's a baby. They don't do much. And also, that well is now dry. There's no double dipping here. You can add another baby, a dog, and a little girl all you want, but eventually folks do wise up to what you're doing, and they're not going to fall for that cheap trick again and again. Which is why these jump the shark moments are ultimately what people mark as being the end of a series. Again, you're past the point of no return. There's no turning back here. I really don't have a name for this next one, but I guess it's more of a feeling, a vibe. When a series gradually starts changing over time, but it's not something you notice until taking a step back to look at the bigger picture, in which this shift starts to become more apparent. This is most notable when it comes to the characters of long-running series, and how you can slowly see them all start filling in their respective roles. They don't feel like characters anymore, and instead caricatures of what they once represent. Oh, Flanderization, that's the word. This phrase was obviously coined in reference to Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, a trait which I personally deem as being the result of a long-running series rarely being able to keep the same writers and directors throughout its run. New talent has to be brought in to take over, and through the process of new staff being cycled in and out, you have to accept the fact that these new guys haven't spent nearly as much time with these characters as the previous ones did, and so oftentimes you find them starting to lean into one or two specific traits that they're most known for, becoming increasingly more one-note. With the titular Ned Flanders himself, it's in relation to how he was initially nothing more than Homer's rival. A better and kinder man who had more money, a nicer family, a fucking pool table in his basement. But also, he was a Christian. I always figured that was used to elevate the joke a bit, in the same way all his other traits were. It's a way of him one-upping Homer. Like, not only is he super well off, but he's also an incredibly nice guy who follows the Bible to a T. However, after a while, this got simplified further and further, and while they certainly do a lot more with him now in the show, it's hard to deny that for a large chunk of the series he remained as nothing more than Christian. Laugh. I could continue talking about like half the Simpsons cast are Family Guy, but I want to highlight a show in which I believe had it the worst of any I've ever seen. And that's Spongebob. I feel completely neutral towards new Spongebob. Again, my point here isn't to say one is objectively bad, more so just pointing out that these differences do exist between old and new. But something I always enjoyed about early Spongebob was that he was just a guy. He had such a wide range of emotions, happy, sad, angry. Sure, they more often than not focused on his naivety and optimism, but it was never overbearing unless the plot demanded it. I really think Spongebob is a franchise that suffered from its success when it came to Flanderizing their characters. Like, over time it bought into its hype too much. His face got slapped onto everything with a massive toothy smile and wide shiny eyes. So much so to where after a while, that kind of became all Spongebob is. In those middle seasons, they really focused on him acting like a dumb kid, bordering on being a baby at times. And as a kid, I didn't bat an eye, but I could always tell something was slightly off, but you know, it's SpongeBob. I like SpongeBob. And for most kids, that's good enough. But when being able to look at the series then, in comparison to how it began, it's night and day. That issue certainly got better as they started transitioning into their modern era, I guess it's called. But SpongeBob still has that issue of being too happy-go-lucky for my taste. Again, he's too one-note. In a way, it's like the character traits become gags in and of themselves. SpongeBob works at the Krusty Krab. He loves Krabby Patties and jellyfishing. That's his character. SpongeBob acting naive is no longer a character trait. That is the joke in and of itself. Again, it becomes too obsessed with itself. In the early seasons, the Krusty Krab is this sort of run-down, not good but not bad fast food place that's usually struggling for consistent business. Yeah, sure, SpongeBob loves it and thinks it's the greatest place under the sea, but that's his naivety at play. However, as the series goes on and becomes so popular that every aspect of it becomes a staple in pop culture, selling fucking gummy Krabby Patties and Krusty Krab playsets, it becomes this weird shell of its former self. Now, Bikini Bottom contains a society that will quite literally collapse if the Krusty Krab isn't selling Krabby Patties. SpongeBob went from this kind of nerdy guy who nobody respected, to now frequently being the savior of the entire ocean because of his burger-making abilities. I have to stress again, it's not bad, but it's so far removed from where we started. There's always that point in these long-running shows where it's as if the realness starts to fade. It's hard to describe, but it's like the characters no longer treated as people. They just are the characters and do what said character is expected to do. It's really hard to do that, however, without making your series come off like a lame sitcom, where everyone's lives revolve completely around each other. Again, Grey's Anatomy, nobody has a life outside that fucking hospital. Another thing that comes from you closing off your world so much and creating these ensembles is that you have to start retreading the same story beats over and over again. You seriously don't want the other outcome here, where the viewer becomes bored and wants to see something new again. To bring it up again, Grey's Anatomy suffers from this exact problem. First of all, they will have so many different mashups and character pairings that they start to trip on themselves. You can feel them wanting to go a certain way, but having to reel it back in because of some other bullshit they pulled like 5 episodes ago. There's this really annoying point where the character of George gets married to Kelly Torres. I hate her if you forgot. They make it apparent that they have no real chemistry together and that George has immediately regretted this decision. And this is when he starts gaining feelings for his roommate, Izzy. At this point, the show has all but abandoned their desire for Kelly and George to be together. Now they want Izzy and George. And so it becomes this whole big thing of them being together and trying to keep it a secret before Kelly eventually finds out and they get divorced. But who cares? All that's out of the way and now Izzy and George can just be together. Except, whoa. In their hasty decision-making, rushing through this marriage like they were going for the world record, the audience now not only hates George for cheating on his wife, but they now also hate Izzy for being a homewrecker. Well, damn. Now, in an attempt to win folks back over, they make it so George and Izzy lose all chemistry they had for each other. They used to be able to fuck just fine, had no problem doing it when he was married, but now they just can't make things work and decide to be friends. George dies the following season. You run into a common issue where the story ends, but there's still more show to make. And so now they have to scramble to find a way to shake things up so the 40-year-old women, and me, watching this thing don't want to switch the channel to Scrubs instead. This is especially troubling if your series goes on for as long as Grey's Anatomy. That shit is still airing to this day, even though Grey left with her anatomy like 3 seasons ago. That is quite possibly the saddest case of a show going on too long, when all you need to do to realize that is to look at it. When the actors start physically aging, Meredith goes from this to this. Nothing wrong with that, of course. I'm aware we can't stop the aging process yet, but there's something about it that's just sort of sad. You think about the past 17 seasons and realize, boy, this character's life just sucks. Had an abusive mother, gets Alzheimer's and dies. Finds out she has a long-lost sister, gets in a plane crash and dies. Finally marries the guy of her dreams after 7 seasons, gets hit by a truck, and then wham! COVID. We're at the point now where the actors are starting to die in real life. Rest in peace, James Pickens. Don't even get me started on The Simpsons voices. A lot of people get real defensive when you point out how old these actors are getting. And let's be real, it's not as if Fox are holding them at gunpoint or anything, but to me I just wish they would get some much needed rest. I think after 30 plus seasons, you've done your duties, take a break. I don't want these actors doing this until they die. Same goes for Tom Kenny with Spongebob, because you will get to a point where they're just physically unable to do it anymore. And instead of forcing it and creating a product that can be genuinely hard to listen to at times, I don't know, maybe eventually it'll be time to call it a day. To me, though, the worst thing a show can do after a while is just bring in people who don't care or respect the material. That should be obvious, right? But it happens. This is LS Mark, so of course I got a shot at the Fairly OddParents for completely bastardizing every single aspect of itself by the final seasons. I didn't get to mention this much in my ranking video, but I did a lot of digging in my own time to try and figure out what happened there. And it all seems to stem from one person who was brought in as a head writer. And his name is Ray De Laurentiis. I hope that's his name. This is nothing against this man. He has had a long and extensive career, creating hit shows like the Bubsy cartoon and Coconut Fred Fruit Salad Island. I mean, all I have is this crappy YouTube channel. But again, this is nothing against the guy. I just think he came into the series so late in production, it was already so far removed from where it started, that all he could do was push it further. This guy worked on a lot of old sitcoms, and it seems like that was his mindset he brought into Fairly OddParents. The writer's room also suffering from an extreme case of too many cooks. Early Fairly OddParents seemed to be written by a couple people, with multiple episodes being handed off to different writers. However, in the later seasons, it appears that Ray offered a new approach. That being, every writer would be given the same episode. Everyone would then go off and write the episode whatever way they wanted. And then by the end, they would all rejoice and make some sort of hodgepodge of each's script's best aspects. I can see the vision there, but it perfectly explains why the later episodes feel so unfocused. Characters just standing around telling each other lame jokes. And it's because there was no consistent idea there. He also highlights how he really grew attached to Timmy's dad, Crocker, and Cosmo in particular, a lot of the most iconic characters of the series. And so the mindset seemed to be, well, we have all these funny characters, so if we put them all in a room together, it'll be like 1, 2, 3 times the funny. And while that may work in an ensemble sitcom, this is the Fairly OddParents. There are quite literally da rules that prevent at least one of these characters from being there. Another one of these guys is just Timmy's teacher. And then his dad. Why would these 3 people ever be in a room together? Doesn't matter. Listening to Butch Hartman's podcast with him really put into perspective why I hate the later seasons of Fairly OddParents so much. Everything took a backseat to the comedy, which was never even Fairly OddParents' strong suit. It was so huge because of the characters and the magical element opening up so many opportunities for creative set pieces and sweet little dumb morals. It was like a fine family show, that was its core. But somewhere along the way it just lost itself. It was no longer immersed in its own world. The goal became telling rapid-fire jokes with the most popular characters by any means necessary. And while that may have worked for a sitcom back in the 70s, it sure as hell didn't work for a show that had already spent 7 seasons building up its world and characters. Only for it to all be thrown away. I'm depressed now. Writing for a long-running show is like walking a tightrope. You constantly have to be pushing it in a new direction and wowing the audience. But at the same time, you have to balance it with keeping in mind why people liked it in the first place. You can't divert too greatly or else you risk going overboard and falling flat in your face. If your show goes on for 10, 20, 30 seasons, then that means in some way people grew up with your characters, your world. They're as real to them as any regular person in their lives. And that's not really something you can take for granted. The end, I guess.